Stop the Oplo. Victor Sloane's voice tore through the cabin as the storm battered the windows. Owen Rourke stood over the laptop, blood on his sleeve, Atlas growling beside him. Walk away, Sloane said. Take the money, nobody has to know. Owen looked at the screen, 89%, 92%, then the power died. Darkness swallowed the room. Tessa whispered, Owen, we lost it. A man stepped through the broken window with a gun raised. Atlas moved first. Not like a pet, like a soldier. And that was when Sloane realized the wrong veteran had found Harold Whitcomb's cabin. The eviction notice was taped crookedly to Owen Rourke's apartment door, a pale yellow square trembling each time the hallway heater coughed awake. It was the kind of yellow that did not ask for attention. It accused. Owen stood in front of it with rain darkening the shoulders of his old army jacket, a paper grocery bag sagging in one hand, and Atlas sitting beside his boot like a silent witness. The German shepherd did not sniff the bag or pull toward the door. He watched Owen's face, ears forward, amber eyes steady, as if he had learned long ago that some wounds made no sound. Owen pulled the notice free, final demand. 7 days, balance due. The words were neat, printed, almost polite, which somehow made them worse. He folded the paper once, then again, and slipped it into his pocket, before anyone in the building could open a door and see him standing there like a man being measured for failure. The grocery bag split as he turned the key. A can of beans dropped, rolled across the hallway, and tapped against Atlas's paw. The dog looked down, then back at him. Owen gave a tired breath that almost became a laugh. Yeah, he muttered, that about sums it up inside. The apartment held the cold like an old grudge. It smelled of black coffee, wet wool, machine oil, and the cedar chips Owen used in Atlas's bedding. A folding table sat beneath the kitchen window, crowded with unpaid bills, a cracked phone charger, and a framed photograph from Afghanistan that Owen had tried more than once to put away. In the photo, he was younger, dust-covered, standing beside men whose voices still visited him in the dark. At 42, Owen had the shoulders of someone built for heavy work, and the eyes of someone who had spent years pretending exhaustion was discipline. He fixed wiring when people called, patched roofs when they didn't, and kept moving because stillness gave memory too much room. Atlas padded to his water bowl, drank once, then stopped. Owen noticed. He noticed everything Atlas did. That habit had once saved his life near Kandahar, when the dog froze before a roadside culvert and refused to move another inch. Back then, people listened when Owen gave a warning. Now his warnings lived mostly inside him, where no one had to be inconvenienced by them. He set the groceries on the counter and sorted through the mail. Electric bill, insurance notice, a discount coupon for a steakhouse he had driven past 100 times and never entered. Then came the envelope, cream paper, heavy. His name printed cleanly across the front. Owen Daniel Rourke, return address, Marion Voss, attorney at law, Spokane, Washington. Atlas stepped close and sniffed it once, carefully, then sat. Owen opened it with the pocket knife clipped inside his jacket. The blade was old, sharpened too many times, but it still did what it was asked to do. Inside were legal documents and a death certificate bearing a name he barely recognized. Harold Whitcomb. A great-uncle, maybe. His mother had mentioned a Whitcomb years ago during a phone call that ended with both of them saying less than they meant. Harold, the letter said, had died 5 weeks earlier at 81. No spouse, no close family, no debts. By the terms of his will, he had left Owen a cabin and 46 acres of forest land in Greylock Ridge, Washington, including all contents on the property. Owen read that last line twice. All contents. Rain tapped the window. Somewhere outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. For one strange second, the eviction notice in his pocket seemed lighter. A cabin, land, maybe enough to sell, maybe enough to breathe. But relief did not come cleanly to men like Owen. It arrived carrying questions. Why him? Why now? He turned to the final page and found a handwritten note in narrow blue ink. Mr. Rourke, Harold asked that you visit the property before the first heavy snow. He believed you would understand why. Owen stared at the sentence until the words blurred. Atlas gave a low rumble from deep in his chest and turned toward the rain-dark window. Owen followed his gaze and saw only the street, the parked cars, the tired reflection of his own face. Still, something in the room had shifted. Not hope exactly, not fear. Something between the two. A door opening in the dark. Owen placed the letter on the table, rested one hand on Atlas's head, and felt the dog lean into him with quiet certainty. "Looks like we're driving north," he said. Atlas did not wag his tail. He simply stood, steady and watchful, as if he already knew the cabin in Greylock Ridge was not a rescue from ruin, but the first step toward a truth someone had buried deep and prayed no honest man would ever find. The road to Greylock Ridge narrowed by the mile, as if the forest were closing its hands around it. Owen drove north before dawn in his old Ford F-150, the heater rattling under the dashboard, the windshield wipers dragging rain into silver arcs. Atlas rode in the passenger seat, too large for comfort and too disciplined to complain, his muzzle lifted toward the glass, breath fogging a small patch with every slow exhale. Tacoma had disappeared behind them in wet streetlights and refinery smoke. Now Washington rose around them in dark shoulders of pine, rock and low clouds. The printed directions from Marion Voss lay folded on Owen's thigh because cell service had vanished 20 minutes earlier, leaving his phone blank and useless in the cup holder. He should have felt foolish for coming. A broke veteran chasing a dead relative's cabin into the mountains sounded like the kind of story men told at bars before someone shook their head and said, "That poor guy." Owen hated pity more than hunger. Pity looked at a man and stopped seeing the man. It saw a problem, a cautionary tale, a thing to step around. Atlas shifted once, nails clicking softly against the worn vinyl seat. Owen glanced over. "You don't like this road either?" The dog's ears remained forward. His eyes did not leave the trees. By late morning, the rain had thinned into a cold mist. Frost gathered along the gravel shoulders. The last stretch was barely a road at all, only two muddy tire ruts climbing between firs so tall they seemed to hold the sky in place. Branches scraped the truck doors with dry, whispering fingers. At the top of a slow bend, Owen saw the cabin. It sat alone in a shallow clearing, low and weathered, with a sagging porch and a roof patched in 3 different shades of tin. The exterior had once been white, maybe, but years had worn it down to gray boards and green moss. A narrow creek moved beyond it, half hidden under ferns. 46 acres, Marion had said. Private well. Cabin built in 1952, all contents included. Owen killed the engine. Silence rushed in so quickly it felt physical, no traffic, no voices, no hum of power lines. Just water somewhere in the trees and the faint tick of the cooling engine. For a moment he saw what the land could become: repairs. A wood stove, Atlas asleep by a real fire. No landlord, no hallway notices, no neighbors pretending not to hear him wake from dreams. Then Atlas growled. Low, controlled. Not fear. Not threat. Owen turned. The German shepherd stood rigid in the passenger seat, nose pointed toward the back of the cabin, hackles rising along his spine. "Easy," Owen whispered. Atlas did not ease. Owen stepped out first, boots sinking into wet needles. Cold air slid under his collar. He opened Atlas's door and gave the release command. The dog dropped to the ground without hesitation, but instead of ranging the clearing, he moved close to Owen's left side, shoulder brushing his leg. That told Owen more than any bark would have. He circled the cabin slowly. No fresh tire tracks that he could see. No smoke from the chimney, no broken glass. But near the rear steps, Atlas stopped and pressed his nose to the damp boards. He inhaled once, then looked toward the tree line. Owen followed the gaze. Nothing moved. Still, the woods felt occupied in that peculiar way empty places sometimes do, as if they were remembering the last person who passed through. The key Marion had mailed was brass, old, and colder than it should have been. It turned on the second try. The door opened inward with a swollen groan. Dust lay across the main room in soft gray sheets. A couch sagged beside a stone fireplace. A calendar from 2020 hung crooked on the wall. The air smelled of cedar rot, cold ash, and something metallic beneath it, faint but sharp. Atlas entered after Owen, head low, scanning. The cabin looked abandoned. That should have been comforting. It was not. Owen moved through the living room, then the bedroom, then a small washroom with a rust-stained sink. Everything was old, neglected, still. Then he stepped into the kitchen and stopped. The pantry door stood slightly open. Inside, the shelves were full. Not with antique jars or mouse-chewed flour, but with recent supplies. Bottled water, canned soup, coffee, batteries, medical gauze, propane canisters, sealed bags of rice, and 2 unopened sacks of premium dog food. Owen stared. The expiration dates were current, some were months away. Atlas came beside him and sniffed the lower shelf, then backed away, ears flat. "House has been empty since 2020, Owen said softly, though no one had asked. His voice sounded wrong in the room. He picked up a can of chili. no dust on the rim. Someone had stocked this place recently. Someone had expected to return. Owen set the can down with care. The small hope he had carried from Tacoma did not disappear, but it changed shape. It became sharper, more dangerous. Outside, wind moved through the pines, and the old cabin gave a settling creak that sounded almost like a footstep. Atlas turned toward the hallway, body still as carved stone. Owen reached for the flashlight on his belt. The inheritance was real. The land was real. But so was the warning in Atlas's eyes. Whatever Harold Whitcomb had left behind, it had not been waiting quietly. By noon, the sky had dropped lower over Greylock Ridge, turning the whole mountain the color of wet ash. Owen locked the cabin behind him, though the gesture felt childish after what he had found inside. Locks were for honest people. Whoever had stocked that pantry had already crossed whatever line a door was supposed to hold. Atlas waited by the truck, not pacing, not whining, just watching the tree line with the grave patience of an old soldier. Owen looked back at the cabin once before climbing in. Its boarded windows reflected nothing. The place did not look abandoned anymore. It looked like it was keeping its mouth shut. The town of Larkspur Hollow sat 11 miles down the mountain, tucked between a river bend and a stand of black firs. Population 1,386, according to the rusted sign leaning at the roadside. There was a gas station with one working pump, a hardware store with deer feed stacked outside, a post office the size of a tool shed, and a diner called the Copper Spoon, where every truck in the lot seemed to have mud on the tires and history in the dents. Owen parked near the diner window. Atlas stayed close as they crossed the lot, his leash loose but his attention sharp. Inside, heat rolled over them, carrying the smell of coffee, bacon grease, old wood, and people who had known each other too long to bother with introductions. Conversations softened when Owen entered. Not stopped, that would have been too obvious. They simply lowered, like radios turned down in separate rooms. The woman behind the counter looked up from filling a mug. She was in her 60s, broad-shouldered, with silver hair pinned under a red bandana, and eyes that had probably survived 3 husbands, 2 recessions, and every lie a small town could tell itself. "Dog-friendly?" Owen asked. She glanced at Atlas. Atlas glanced back. Something like respect passed between them. "For him, sure," she said. "For you, depends if you tip." Owen took a stool near the end. "Coffee. Black. That tells me nothing except you've been in the army." He looked at her. She set the mug down. "Marines hold the cup different." "Navy," Owen almost smiled. "Army." Figured. Her name tag read Mart H. She poured coffee, as dark as creek mud, and leaned one hand on the counter. "You're not from here, Tacoma." Nobody comes from Tacoma to Larkspur Hollow for the view in November. Owen let the warmth of the mug settle into his palms. "I inherited a place up on Greylock Ridge, Whitcomb property." The diner changed then, not loudly. A fork paused halfway to a mouth, a chair creaked. The cook behind the pass stopped scraping the grill for one beat too long. Martha's face did not move, but something behind her eyes closed a door. "Harold's place," she said. "You knew him?" Everybody knew Harold. That's not the same as knowing a man. Owen waited. Silence had uses. In war, it made people nervous enough to reveal where they were. In diners, it worked about the same. Martha wiped an already clean spot on the counter. "He used to come in every Thursday, ordered oatmeal, 2 eggs, no toast, tipped $5 no matter what the bill was. Quiet man, polite. Then one year he started talking about things under the mountain." "What kind of things?" An old man in the corner booth spoke without turning around. "Trouble kind." Martha shot him a look. He ignored it. He wore a canvas coat, a hearing aid, and the expression of a man who had outlived his fear but not his caution. "Some folks inherit houses," he said. "Some inherit trouble." Atlas's ears tilted toward him. Owen looked from the old man back to Martha. "There are fresh supplies in the cabin. Food, batteries, medical gear, dog food. The lawyer said nobody's lived there since 2020. Martha's hand stilled around the coffee pot. "Then maybe you should ask the lawyer why she said that." "I did." She didn't know. Or didn't want to know. The words came out low, not accusation. Experience. Owen felt the old tightening beneath his ribs, the body's way of loading a weapon no one could see. "Who was checking on the property?" "Company from town used to. Ridgeway Land Services. Office closed last winter. Owner moved to Idaho or said he did." The old man gave a dry laugh. "People around here say a lot of things when they're leaving fast." Owen turned slightly. "And you are?" "Ben Harlan." retired county road crew. I plowed Harold's road 23 years. He wasn't crazy, if that's what they told you. Martha looked toward the front window. Owen followed her gaze. Across the street, a black SUV sat near the hardware store. Engine running, windows tinted too dark for a town that small. Atlas rose before Owen did. His body went still, tail low, head level. The SUV pulled away slowly, as if whoever sat inside had not expected to be noticed by a dog. Owen placed cash on the counter. Martha did not take it. Instead, she slid a folded paper napkin toward him. Written on it was an address, Ridgway's old office, she said. Then, after a pause, Harold said one thing near the end. Said if a man from the service ever came asking, we should tell him the mountain keeps receipts. Owen looked at her. What does that mean? Martha's mouth tightened. I was hoping you knew. Outside, the SUV was gone, but its tire marks remained black and wet on the road. Atlas sniffed them once, then looked back toward the ridge. Owen felt it then, clear as weather moving through bone. Harold Whitcomb had not left him land. He had left him unfinished business, and half the town had been waiting years for someone brave or desperate enough to open it. Ridgway Land Services occupied a narrow brick building behind the hardware store, the kind of place that looked closed even before anyone locked the door. Owen found the windows filmed with dust, the sign half peeled, and a rusted mailbox stuffed with rain-softened flyers. Atlas sniffed the threshold, then the alley, then stopped beside a dented trash bin where someone had dumped old folders in a contractor bag and forgotten to make the knot tight. Most of the papers were invoices, survey maps, tax notices, nothing that could explain fresh supplies in an empty cabin. But one photocopied maintenance sheet made Owen's thumb pause. Whitcomb property. Quarterly access check. Ventilation system inspected. Lower room secured. The date was only 3 months old. Lower room. Owen stood in the alley with cold mist settling on his hair and felt the words slide under his skin. The cabin had 1 floor, 1 bedroom, 1 washroom, and a kitchen that leaned downhill when a man stood too long in it. No lower room. He folded the paper, slipped it inside his jacket, and drove back toward Greylock Ridge while the afternoon faded into a colorless early dark. The mountain road felt different the second time. Less like a path to land he might own, more like a throat swallowing him slowly. Atlas stayed upright the whole drive, muzzle pointed forward, the way he had ridden in convoys when the world outside the armored glass could not be trusted. By the time they reached the clearing, snow had begun to fall in small hard grains. Owen carried in his tool bag 2 flashlights, a camp lantern, and the kind of caution that had kept him alive when maps lied and quiet roads bloomed into fire. Inside, the cabin seemed to have settled deeper into itself. The pantry waited with its clean cans and current labels. The old couch slumped beside the fireplace. A calendar from 2020 hung on the wall, still open to April, as if time had stopped there out of embarrassment. Owen checked every room again. Walls, floors, ceiling beams, closets, nothing. No hatch. No stairs, no lower room. Maybe Harold was better at hiding things than I am at finding them, he said. Atlas did not look at him. The German shepherd stood near the stone fireplace, head low, ears angled forward, nose working along the baseboards. Owen watched him move, slow and exact. Atlas was not searching randomly. He was following something, not food, not animal, air. The dog stopped at the built-in bookshelf beside the fireplace, the one Owen had dismissed as warped and useless. He pressed his nose to the bottom shelf, inhaled, backed up, then gave the wood one firm scrape with his paw. "What is it?" Owen asked, though the old part of him already knew. Atlas scraped again. Owen crouched. Dust lay thick across most of the shelf, but not all of it. Near the right edge, the dust broke in a crescent, faint but visible, like fingers had gripped there more than once. He emptied the shelf book by book. Water-stained manuals, a 1978 road atlas, a Bible with no family names written inside, and a coffee can full of screws. Behind them, the back panel showed a line too straight to be a crack. Owen ran his knife along it. Something clicked, small and metallic, from inside the wall. Atlas stepped back. Owen pulled. The bookshelf did not open at first. It resisted, swollen by dampened years, then shifted with a groan so low it seemed to come from under the cabin instead of inside it. Behind it was a steel door. Not a safe door, not a storm cellar door. A heavy industrial slab set into concrete, painted the same dead gray as winter sky. In its center was a circular wheel handle, and beneath that a brass plate stamped with 3 characters 3. Owen stared until his breath slowed. He had seen doors like this overseas, built to survive blast pressure and secrets. His first thought was not treasure, it was containment. Atlas stood beside him, silent now, all the warning gone from his body and replaced by something worse, certainty. Owen searched the tool bag with fingers that had gone cold for reasons that had nothing to do with weather. In the bottom of the leather pouch Marion Voss had mailed with the keys, there was a small brass key he had barely noticed before, darker than the others, marked with the same W3. He held it up. Outside, wind pushed against the cabin walls, and the timbers answered with an old, tired creak. Owen slipped the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, too smoothly for something supposedly untouched. The wheel resisted, then moved. Metal sighed behind the door. The sound was soft, patient, almost relieved. A breath released after years of being held. When the door opened, darkness waited on the other side. Not empty darkness, but shaped darkness, descending in concrete steps under the cabin. Cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of iron, paper, dust, and something sealed away from daylight for a very long time. Atlas placed one paw on the first step and looked back at Owen, not asking permission, giving it. Owen lifted the flashlight, felt the weight of the Ridgeway paper against his chest, and understood that Harold Whitcomb had not built a cabin over a room. He had built a life over a secret. "All right," Owen whispered. "Let's see what he was so afraid to leave behind." The stairs descended farther than Owen expected. Each concrete step narrowed, damp and dusted with a gray powder that lifted under his boots like ash. Atlas moved ahead of him by one pace, never pulling, never rushing, his body low and deliberate. The beam of Owen's flashlight shook against the walls, catching old conduit pipes, rusted brackets, and the faint white scars of hand-poured concrete. Whoever had built this place had not been guessing. This was not a fruit cellar dug by a lonely man with a shovel. This was engineered, reinforced, hidden with purpose. At the bottom, the passage opened into a rectangular chamber large enough to hold 3 trucks side by side. Owen stopped so suddenly Atlas turned back. The air was cold and unnaturally dry, carrying the smell of metal, paper, machine oil, and time sealed too tightly. Steel shelves lined the walls. Olive-drab storage crates sat stacked in rows. A workbench stood beneath a dead fluorescent fixture. On the far side of the room, behind a wire cage and a heavy padlock, were canvas sacks, black cases, and 6 low steel boxes stamped with inventory numbers that had been scraped nearly clean. Owen cut the padlock with bolt cutters from his truck kit, the crack of metal sounding too loud beneath the mountain. Inside the first box, his flashlight struck gold. Not jewelry, not coins spilled like a pirate story. Bars, clean, rectangular, wrapped in paper bands, marked with weights and serial numbers. He opened the second box, more. The third held sealed bundles of old $100 bills, vacuum-packed and yellowed at the edges. Owen sank back on his heels, the flashlight beam sliding off the gold and trembling across the floor. $5 million. Maybe more. Enough to erase every notice, every debt, every winter spent choosing between fuel and food. Enough to buy distance from landlords, collection calls, charity looks, and the polite little ways people measured a man who had fallen. For one human second, Owen let himself see it. A clean house, a repaired truck, Atlas sleeping by a stove, doctors paid in full, silence bought and kept. Then Atlas nudged his wrist, once, firm. The dog was not looking at the gold. He was facing a smaller safe tucked beneath the workbench, nearly hidden behind a folded tarp. Owen swallowed, ashamed though no one had accused him. "Yeah," he whispered. "I know." The smaller safe opened with the W3 key. Inside was a waterproof case, a stack of photographs, a black hard drive, and a letter addressed in careful block print. To Owen Rourke, if he still believes names matter. Owen sat on an overturned crate and opened it. Harold Whitcomb's handwriting was thin but steady. He did not waste words on comfort. He wrote that the gold was never the treasure. It was bait, leverage, hush money, emergency money, blood money, depending on who held it and why. He wrote that he had spent 30 years guarding proof of a program called Project Blue Meridian, buried under shell companies, defense contracts, and official denials. He wrote that men and women had been hurt, blamed, erased, and filed away as unstable, careless, or expendable, because admitting the truth would have cost powerful people more than money. Owen turned to the photographs. Faces stared back at him from construction sites, security checkpoints, medical trailers, county hearings, workers in hard hats, Veterans in faded uniforms, engineers with tired eyes, a nurse standing beside a clinic sign. Ordinary Americans, every one of them caught in a machine that had learned how to grind people quietly. Then Owen saw a familiar name on a personnel report. Marcus Reed, his chest tightened so sharply he nearly dropped the page. Marcus had served with him, laughed with him, pulled him out of a burning vehicle once, with one hand bleeding through his glove. After coming home, Marcus had been dismissed by everyone as broken, drunk, unreliable. He died alone in a rented room outside Boise, and the world had accepted the explanation because it was easier than asking who had helped break him. Owen read the attached memo twice. Marcus had tried to report Blue Meridian. His service record had been altered, his medical claims delayed, his credibility destroyed. Atlas rested his head against Owen's knee, and that small weight nearly undid him. Owen looked back at the gold, bright and useless under the flashlight, then at Marcus' name, black ink on white paper, still waiting to be defended. Harold's final line sat at the bottom of the page like a hand on his shoulder. Gold can buy silence, Owen, but it cannot buy back a man's name once the world agrees to forget him. Owen closed his eyes. When he opened them, the room had changed. It was no longer a vault, it was a witness stand. Owen did not leave the vault when he found Marcus Reed's name. He should have. The rational part of him knew that a hidden room beneath a dead man's cabin was no place to sit with old grief, especially with fresh supplies upstairs and a black SUV nosing around town like a shark in shallow water. But some names do not let a man walk away. Some names reach out of paper and close a fist around his throat. Marcus Reed had been 38 when he died, broad-smiled, left-handed, always humming Motown under his breath before patrol because he said silence tempted bad luck. Owen remembered him laughing in dust, remembered his hand gripping Owen's vest, remembered the burn of smoke and hot metal, and Marcus shouting, "Move, Rourke, move," as if saving another man were nothing more than pulling a stubborn door open. Back home, the reports had called Marcus unstable, non-compliant, financially distressed. Words smooth enough to fit into a file, cold enough to bury a life. Owen spread the Blue Meridian documents across the workbench while Atlas lay near the steel door, ears alert, body angled toward the stairs. The dogs seemed to understand that their danger had changed shape. It was no longer simply outside in the trees. It was here, in ink, in signatures, in the practiced language powerful people used when they wanted cruelty to sound administrative. Project Blue Meridian had begun as a regional infrastructure security initiative in the late 1990s. Officially meant to harden remote communications sites and emergency access routes across the Pacific Northwest. That was the public face. Beneath it lived the real thing. Private contractors, defense consultants, chemical storage tests, land acquisitions pushed through shell companies, medical incidents rewritten as worker negligence, and payments routed so cleanly through legal channels they looked almost holy. Almost. Owen read incident summaries where men with burned lungs became smokers with poor health choices. Equipment failures became operator error. Forced buyouts became voluntary relocation. Witnesses became disgruntled former employees. Veterans hired for security became convenient scapegoats because the public already knew how to pity them, fear them, or dismiss them. There it was, page after page, a machine teaching itself how to make a human being smaller until he became a footnote. Atlas rose suddenly and pressed his nose against Owen's sleeve. Owen realized his hands had started shaking, not violently, just enough to rattle the corner of a photograph against the table. In it, Harold Whitcomb stood younger and thinner beside a survey crew near Greylock Ridge, one hand shielding his eyes from the sun. On the back, written in pencil, were 4 words. "We thought it mattered." Owen turned over more photos. Martha Bell's diner in the background of one town meeting, Ben Harlan beside a county snowplow, a nurse named Lorraine Pike, whose clinic report had been marked "lost in transition," a maintenance foreman named Dale Mercer, blamed for an explosion that another memo admitted had been caused by improper chemical storage. None of these people looked dramatic. They looked tired, decent, ordinary. People who paid mortgages, fixed fences, brought coffee to work in dented thermoses, and trusted that if something terrible happened, the truth would at least stand beside them. Instead, truth had been locked underground with gold. Owen found the file on Marcus inside a red folder marked Credibility Containment. The phrase made something in him go quiet. not calm. Quiet in the way a room goes quiet before glass breaks. Marcus had reported unauthorized dumping near a restricted access road in 2019. Within 6 months, his benefits review was delayed. His landlord was contacted through a risk advisory, and an internal psychological note questioned his reliability despite no examining doctor signing it. Owen read the final recommendation: isolate, discredit, exhaust, 3 words. That was all it took for someone in an office to turn a living man into a problem to be managed. Atlas gave a low whine. Owen placed one hand on the dog's head, fingers sinking into thick fur, and breathed until the room returned to edges and corners. They didn't just hide what they did, he said softly. They taught everyone not to look. His voice sounded strange, older. He thought of every veteran he had seen, talked over in waiting rooms, every laborer called careless after being sent into danger. Every poor man whose anger was used as evidence against his pain. Respect, he realized, was not a slogan on a courthouse wall. Respect was believing a person's name still mattered after their usefulness ended. Owen gathered the documents carefully, no longer touching them like evidence alone, but like remains. Atlas stood with him. Above them, the cabin creaked in the wind. Somewhere outside, snow began striking the roof, soft at first, then harder. Owen looked once more at Marcus's altered record, then at the hard drive in Harold's case. Whatever Blue Meridian had been built to protect, it had mistaken silence for permanence. Owen had made that mistake too, in his own life, calling withdrawal peace, calling numbness survival. Not anymore. We're not letting them keep this room, he told Atlas. The dog looked toward the stairs, ready before Owen was. Owen came up from the vault with Harold's documents packed in an old canvas field bag, and the hard drive tucked inside the inner pocket of his jacket, close enough that he could feel its hard edge against his ribs. Atlas climbed the stairs behind him, pausing at the steel door to look back once into the dark, as if leaving that room unattended felt like leaving wounded men on a battlefield. By the time Owen closed the hidden shelf and returned the cabin to its lie, the snow had thickened outside, tapping against the windows in dry, nervous bursts. He made coffee on the propane burner with water from the pantry and sat at the kitchen table beneath the dead calendar from 2020. The cabin seemed smaller now, not because its walls had moved, but because the truth beneath it had filled every inch. He had just unfolded Marcus Reed's file again when his phone, useless all morning, lit up with one weak bar and began to ring. The number was blocked. Owen let it ring twice. Atlas lifted his head. On the 3rd ring, Owen answered. No greeting came, only a man's breathing, slow and comfortable, the sound of someone sitting warm somewhere, far from the consequences of his own orders. Mr. Rourke, the voice said at last. You've had a long day. Owen did not move. Who is this? A friend of the situation. Owen looked toward the pantry, the stocked shelves, the clean cans, the dog food that should not have been there. I don't have situations, I have names. A faint pause, not enough to be fear. Enough to be irritation. Harold Whitcomb was an old man with old guilt. He spent his final years turning misunderstandings into mythology. Whatever you think you found, I can assure you it has been reviewed, dismissed, and legally contained. Owen almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Legally contained. The same kind of phrase Blue Meridian used when a man's lungs burned or his reputation disappeared. Then you won't mind if I ask a few people to review it again. You're tired, the man said. You're behind on rent. Your VA claims are still under appeal. Your truck needs a transmission. You have no dependents, no meaningful support network, and one aging dog requiring medical care within the next few years. I'm not saying this to insult you. I'm saying it because I understand pressure. Owen's hand tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. Atlas stood, a quiet shadow beside the table. You don't understand pressure, Owen said. You understand leverage. The man sighed softly, as if disappointed by a student. There is approximately $5 million on that property. Keep it. Sell the land. Leave Washington. Start over somewhere dry. Arizona, maybe. New Mexico. Sign a simple non-disclosure agreement. Surrender the hard drive, and no one will ever bother you again. Outside, the wind leaned against the cabin. Owen looked down at Marcus's photograph, at the younger face frozen in a moment before paperwork, lies, and delay had done what bullets had failed to do. $5 million, a clean life, a quiet road out. The offer did not sound evil. That was what made it dangerous. Evil, Owen had learned, rarely entered a room covered in blood. More often, it came dressed as relief. "What's your name?" Owen asked. Another pause. "Victor Sloan." Owen wrote it on the back of an unpaid electric bill with a carpenter's pencil. "You worked Blue Meridian. I cleaned up after men who lacked perspective." "You mean men who still had a conscience?" This time, Sloan's voice cooled. "Conscience is a luxury people claim when they do not have to manage consequences." Atlas gave a low growl, not at the phone, but toward the window above the sink. Owen turned his head slightly. Beyond the glass, through a veil of snow, something moved near the tree line. A dark shape, then gone. "You have someone outside my cabin," Owen said. "I have people ensuring a sensitive matter does not become reckless." Owen stood slowly and reached for the canvas bag. "Tell them to stay out of my way. Mr. Rourke, you are not a hero." The words landed quietly, almost gently. Owen looked at Atlas, at the gray in the dog's muzzle, at the steady amber eyes that had never once measured him by his bank account, his nightmares, or his usefulness. "No," Owen said. "I'm a witness," he ended the call. For a moment, the cabin held its breath. Then Atlas moved to the door, body low, ready. Owen slipped Harold's files into the bag, checked the old revolver Marion had said belonged to Harold without drawing it, and killed the lantern. Darkness folded around them. Outside, snow erased the tire tracks, the porch steps, the world beyond the clearing. But it could not erase Victor Sloan's name now. It could not erase Marcus Reed's. Owen opened the back door, and Atlas stepped into the storm first, not as a pet, not as a weapon, but as the one soul in the world who had already chosen the truth without needing to be convinced. Owen did not drive back toward Tacoma. Tacoma meant the apartment, the yellow notice, the thin walls, and a life small enough for Victor Sloan to predict. Instead, he took the service road west, headlights off for the first quarter mile, Atlas standing braced in the passenger seat, eyes fixed through the windshield, as snow turned the world into moving static. The black SUV did not follow at first. Then, near the lower switchback, two pale beams appeared high behind them, careful, distant, patient. Owen felt no surprise. Only a familiar tightening, the old sense of being marked. "Hold on," he told Atlas, though the dog already had. At a logging fork half buried in snow, Owen cut right without braking, dropped the truck into low gear, and let the forest swallow them. Branches scraped both doors. Mud grabbed at the tires. The headlights behind him paused, then continued straight down the main road. Atlas exhaled once through his nose, almost like judgment. By midnight, Owen reached a roadside motel outside Ellensburg called the Bitterroot Inn, a two-story strip of tired yellow lights, vending machines, and curtains that had seen too many men trying to disappear. He paid cash under a name no one asked him to spell and carried Harold's canvas bag inside room 14. The place smelled of bleach, old carpet, and electric heat. Atlas checked the bathroom, the window, the gap beneath the door, then settled beside the bed facing the entrance. Owen sat at the small desk and called the only number Martha Bell had written under the Ridgeway address, Tessa Vale. She answered on the fifth ring, voice rough with sleep and suspicion. "Who gave you this number?" "A woman in Larkspur Hollow. That narrows it to everyone who drinks coffee and minds other people's business." Owen looked at Marcus Reed's file spread, beneath the lamp. "I have Harold Whitcomb's Blue Meridian records." Silence, not empty silence, the kind made by someone sitting up. "That's not a phrase you use unless you're lying, crazy, or already in danger. Maybe all three. Where are you?" "Not saying yet." "Good," she said. "You're smarter than the last man who called me about Harold." 2 hours later, Tessa Vale knocked once, then twice, then once again. Owen opened the door with Atlas beside him, and she froze just long enough for the dog to decide she was not the first threat in the room. Tessa was in her mid-40s, sharp-faced, tired-eyed, with a wool coat buttoned wrong and a reporter's bag hanging from one shoulder like it had grown there. She did not introduce herself with warmth. She looked at the canvas bag and said, "Show me something that can ruin somebody important." Owen showed her Marcus, then the chemical memos, then the altered medical reports, then Victor Sloan's name written on 3 separate authorizations. Tessa stopped making comments after the second folder. By the 4th, her mouth had gone pale. "I lost a job chasing rumors about this," she said quietly. "They called it obsession, then budget cuts, then professional misconduct." Owen heard what she did not say. "They knew how to erase women too, not just soldiers. Can you publish it? Not like this." We need verification, redundancy, metadata, original scans, mirrored release, legal routing. She pulled out her phone. And we need Noah. Noah Keene arrived before dawn in a dented Subaru with a cracked windshield and a laptop case held to his chest like a priest carrying a relic. He was small, nervous, and younger than Owen expected, with restless hands and eyes that took in outlets, cameras, exits, and router lights before they took in people. Atlas liked him immediately, which annoyed Tessa and reassured Owen. Noah connected the hard drive through 2 adapters, muttered at Harold's encryption, then went very still when the first archive opened. He didn't just save files, Noah said. He built a dead man release system. If we authenticate the witness key, this can go to newspapers, watchdog groups, court clerks, and mirrored servers at once. Witness key? Owen asked. Noah turned the laptop toward him. A prompt glowed on the screen. Final Offie 3 Physical Talkin'. Tessa rubbed both hands over her face. Where is it? Owen looked toward the snow-dark window, toward the mountain beyond it. Atlas rose before he said a word, walked to Harold's canvas bag, and placed one paw on it. Owen felt a strange ache move through him. Not fear exactly, but the burden of being believed by the only creature who had never asked for proof. Back at the cabin, he said. Outside, a car slowed in the motel lot, then rolled on. Everyone stopped breathing until the sound faded. Tessa zipped the files into her bag. Noah began copying what he could. Owen stood and reached for his jacket. For the first time since the yellow notice, he was not alone in the room with his ruin. He had a reporter who had paid for asking the wrong questions, a hacker who knew truth needed more than courage to survive, and a German shepherd who had been leading him, step by step, away from silence. By the time Owen turned the truck back toward Greylock Ridge, the storm had stopped pretending to be weather and become a wall. Snow hammered the windshield in white fists. The wipers fought and lost again. Tessa sat behind him with a scanner clutched against her coat, lips moving silently as she reviewed the release list Harold had built. 3 newspapers, 2 watchdog groups, a federal court clerk, 4 mirror servers, and 1 public archive that could not be quietly erased before morning. Noah rode beside her, pale in the dashboard glow, one hand wrapped around the laptop bag like it contained a beating heart. Atlas stood in the front passenger footwell because sitting had become impossible for him. His body leaned with each curve, ears forward, eyes fixed beyond the snow, as if he could see the cabin through the mountain itself. No one talked much. There are silences made of fear, and there are silences made of purpose. This one was both. The cabin appeared close to midnight, a dark shape under a roof of white, no lights, no tire tracks Owen could trust. He killed the engine below the clearing and let the truck coast the final 30 yards. No unnecessary noise, he said. Tessa gave a humorless breath. That was going to be my first suggestion. Atlas slipped out first, vanishing into the storm like something the forest had remembered. Owen followed with the canvas bag. Noah carried the laptop and satellite uplink. Tessa carried the files Harold had labeled Kamimari Proof. They reached the porch without a shot, without a shout, without any sign of Victor Sloane's people. That worried Owen more than an ambush would have. Inside, the cabin was colder than outside, the kind of cold that belonged to places waiting to be searched. Owen moved to the bookshelf. Atlas stopped halfway across the room and growled. Low, immediate. From the back hallway came the soft click of a boot shifting on old wood. Owen killed his flashlight. Darkness snapped shut. A man breathed. Then Atlas launched, not wild, not vicious, but precise. A trained body moving with a single command written in muscle. Someone cursed. A flashlight struck the floor and spun, throwing broken circles across the walls. Owen drove his shoulder into the intruder, slammed him against the doorframe, and took the pistol from his hand before the man fully understood he had lost. How many? Owen asked. The man said nothing. Atlas stood over him, teeth bared just enough to make silence seem wise. 2, outside, Tessa whispered from the window, maybe 3. Noah's voice shook. We don't have time. Owen opened the hidden door. The vault air rose cold and metallic. Get the uplink ready. He descended alone with Atlas at his heels. The room below looked unchanged, gold still sleeping in its boxes. Photographs still watching from the workbench. Marcus Reed's file still open where Owen had left it. For one irrational second, he thought about the money again. Not because he wanted it now, but because the world had made him tired enough to understand why good men sometimes settled for escape. Then Atlas nudged the red folder with his nose. Owen took the witness key from a sealed compartment behind Harold's desk, a small steel drive stamped W3. Above him, glass shattered. Tessa shouted. Owen ran. In the main room, Noah had the satellite unit balanced on the table, cables running like veins across the floor. Tessa pressed a towel to a cut along her temple, jaw clenched, eyes bright with pain and fury. "They're coming in," she said. Owen shoved the witness key into Noah's hand. The laptop woke. Final. Release countdown began. 41%, 52%. The generator coughed outside and died. The screen went black. Noah made a sound that was almost a sob. Atlas bolted to the back door, barking once, sharp as a rifle crack. Owen understood. The auxiliary cable. Harold had run a backup line from the shed. He plunged into the snow with Atlas beside him while rounds snapped into trees overhead. Not cinematic, not clean, just ugly bursts of men trying to bury paper with panic. Owen reached the shed, found the cable half buried, and dragged it back as Atlas placed himself between Owen and the tree line, growling into the storm as if daring the dark to step closer. Power returned with a flicker. Noah shouted from inside. 89. Owen stumbled through the door. Tessa held the laptop steady with both hands, 94%, 97%. A window exploded inward. Owen covered Noah with his body. Atlas barked again, deeper this time, and the man climbing through the frame froze at the sight of him. 100%. Abalu Kamlit. The words sat on the screen, small and plain, too quiet for what they had done. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Tessa began to laugh and cry at the same time, one hand over her mouth. Noah sank to the floor. Owen looked at Atlas, snow clinging to the gray around his muzzle, and felt something inside him loosen that had been locked since long before Harold's letter. Outside, the men in the storm no longer sounded like hunters. They sounded like people who had arrived too late. The truth did not explode the way Owen had imagined it might. It did not arrive with sirens tearing through the mountains or helicopters splitting the snow-heavy sky. At first, it was only a screen in a cold cabin showing 2 small words, "Upload complete." Then the world began to move. Phones rang. Servers mirrored. Editors woke in dark apartments and stared at documents no one was supposed to have. Court clerks received sealed packets. Watchdog groups opened files with names attached. Real names, human names, the kind Blue Meridian had spent years sanding down into case numbers. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving Greylock Ridge buried in white and strangely peaceful, as if the mountain had exhaled after holding its breath for decades. Victor Sloan's men were gone before state police reached the cabin. Men like that rarely stayed to explain themselves. But they had left boot prints, shell casings, a disabled camera, and one abandoned SUV half slid into a ditch below the ridge. Evidence, Tessa called it, with a tired smile that looked almost holy. Noah sat wrapped in a blanket near the fireplace, his laptop balanced on his knees, watching article after article appear. The copper spoon was mentioned. Larkspur Hollow, Harold Whitcomb, Marcus Reed, Dale Mercer, Lorraine Pike. Names Owen had carried out of the vault like fragile things were now being spoken by people who had never known they existed yesterday. Atlas slept for 20 minutes, then woke as if he had remembered duty was not finished. He limped to Owen's side and leaned against him, warm and solid and alive. Owen placed one hand on the old dog's head and looked through the broken window at the forest beyond. He had thought silence was something a man chose. Now he understood silence could also be built around him, brick by brick, until he mistook it for shelter. The hearings began 6 weeks later in Washington, D.C., under lights so bright they made every face look tired. Owen wore the only dark suit he owned, bought secondhand, and altered by a woman in Tacoma who refused payment after hearing his name on the news. Atlas could not enter the hearing room floor, but he waited outside with Tessa, lying beneath a marble bench, eyes open, as steady as a promise. When Owen raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth, he did not feel brave. He felt present. That was different. Bravery had always sounded loud to him, something stamped on metals and shouted over drums. Presence was quieter. It was staying in the chair when powerful men tried to make memory sound uncertain. It was saying Marcus Reed's name clearly into a microphone. It was correcting a senator when he called the harmed workers collateral participants. They were people, Owen said, his voice rough but even. They had names. Jobs, bad knees, favorite songs, bills on their tables, dogs waiting at doors. They were not collateral anything. No one spoke for a moment after that. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. In the months that followed, some officials resigned. Some denied everything until their signatures found them. Victor Sloan was subpoenaed, then indicted on charges Owen only half understood, but Tessa explained with grim satisfaction over diner coffee. Records were reopened. Families received apologies that came too late, but still mattered because late respect was not the same as no respect at all. Marcus Reed's service record was corrected. His sister called Owen one evening and cried without trying to hide it. Owen did not know what to say, so he listened. Sometimes listening was the only form of honor left. The gold stayed locked under court supervision until lawyers untangled what could be returned, what had been stolen, and what Harold had meant as restitution. Owen kept none of it for himself beyond what the court allowed for the property. With Tessa Noah and Marion Voss, he helped create the Reed Whitcomb Fund, a small foundation for veterans, workers, and whistleblowers whose names had been buried under paperwork. It was not enough to fix the world. Owen had stopped trusting anything that claimed to fix the world, but it fixed a few doors, a few medical bills, a few records, a few graves that finally received the right words. Spring came slowly to Greylock Ridge. Snow retreated from the porch first, then from the creek, then from the roots of the fir trees. Owen repaired the cabin one board at a time. He replaced the broken window, patched the roof, hauled out the ruined couch, and left Harold's old workbench in the vault untouched except for one change. Above it, he hung a simple wooden plaque with the names confirmed so far. Marcus Reed was near the top. On a clear morning in May, a reporter asked Owen if he considered himself a hero. He looked down at Atlas, who lay in a patch of sunlight with his gray muzzle resting on his paws, and shook his head. "No," he said. "I just got tired of watching good people get treated like they were disposable." The reporter waited for more, but Owen had learned not every truth needed dressing. Later, when the trucks left and the ridge grew quiet again, he sat on the porch beside Atlas and listened to the creek move through the trees. The cabin no longer felt like a trap or a miracle. It felt like a place where truth had passed through and left the air cleaner behind it. Owen reached down, scratched behind Atlas's ear, and watched the sun break across the forest floor. Some treasures were buried in vaults. Others were buried in names people tried to erase. Owen Rourke had found both, and with Atlas beside him, he had chosen the one that could set the living free. If this story moved you, take a second to like and subscribe so more stories like Owen and Atlas's can find the people who need them. And tell me in the comments, which moment stayed with you most, and where are you watching from?